The briefing room at Nellis Air Force Base fell into the kind of silence that makes seasoned officers uncomfortable. General Marcus Hartwell, a man whose decorated chest could tell the story of 3 decades of American air power, stared at the woman across the table with an expression somewhere between confusion and recognition. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her weathered flight suit, but it was the small fabric square on her tactical vest that held his attention like a magnetic force. "Ma'am," his voice carried the weight of authority, but underneath lurked something else, uncertainty. "That patch you're wearing, the 77th Tactical Squadron insignia, that unit was decommissioned in 1987. Captain Vera Ghost Kovach didn't move. Her pale green eyes, the color of winter ice, held his gaze with the kind of steadiness that comes from staring death in the face and not blinking first. The patch in question, a silver aircraft silhouette against a midnight blue background with the words Silent Thunder, embroidered beneath, seemed to pulse with significance in the sterile room. Around the table, other officers shifted uncomfortably, sensing they were witnessing something beyond their clearance level. "Sir," Ghost's voice carried a faint accent, remnants of a childhood spent in the Balkans before her family fled to America. "Some things never truly retire. They just wait for the right moment to fly again." The mystery deepened when Colonel Sarah Martinez, the base's intelligence chief, pulled up Ghost's service record on her tablet, and her face went pale. According to official documents, Captain Kovach had been assigned to routine transport missions for the past 5 years. Nothing in her file suggested she'd ever flown anything more dangerous than a C-130 Hercules. Yet here she sat, wearing the insignia of a squadron that had never officially existed, speaking with the quiet confidence of someone who danced with angels at 40,000 feet. General Hartwell's aide, Major Thompson, leaned forward. "Sir, maybe we should verify." "No," Hartwell's voice cut through the air like a blade. His eyes never left Ghost's face, searching for something in those wintergreen depths. "Continue, Captain." Ghost reached into her flight bag and withdrew a manila folder, its edges worn smooth by countless hands. The classification stamps across its surface had faded, but the words EYES Only Operation Shadow Crown were still legible. She placed it on the table between them like a chess piece being moved into position. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Gentlemen," Ghost said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we have a problem." Outside, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly under a sky that promised storms. But inside that briefing room, a different kind of storm was about to break. One that would test everything these officers thought they knew about honor, sacrifice, and the price of keeping secrets in the shadows above the clouds. The briefing room's air conditioning hummed with mechanical precision, but couldn't quite mask the tension radiating from every corner. General Hartwell's weathered hands trembled almost imperceptibly as he opened the classified folder Ghost had placed before him. The first document bore a presidential seal from 1986, its edges yellow with age. His eyes scanned the text, and with each line, his expression shifted from skepticism to something approaching awe. "Project Silent Thunder," he read aloud, his voice barely audible. "Experimental squadron tasked with impossible missions behind enemy lines." He looked up at Ghost, then back at the documents. This can't be real." Ghost leaned back in her chair, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp as surgical steel. "Officially, sir, it never was real. 12 pilots, hand-picked from various branches. We didn't exist on any roster, didn't appear in any chain of command. We were ghosts flying phantom aircraft on missions that never happened." Colonel Martinez was frantically cross-referencing data on her tablet. "Captain, your records show you were stationed at Dover Air Force Base during this entire period, flying cargo runs to Germany." "Cover story," Ghost replied, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Very thorough cover story. My transport flights provided perfect alibis for when I was actually flying other aircraft." She paused, letting the weight of implication settle. Experimental aircraft. Prototype stealth fighters that wouldn't see official deployment for another decade. Major Thompson's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. You're saying you've been flying classified prototypes since the 1980s? F-117A Nighthawks before they officially existed. Early stealth bombers. Aircraft so far ahead of their time that even mentioning their designations required presidential authorization. Ghost's voice carried the weight of decades spent keeping impossible secrets. We flew missions over Eastern Europe, deep penetration surveillance, target reconnaissance behind the Iron Curtain. General Hartwell's face had gone ashen. As a young captain in the late 80s, he'd heard whispers of unexplained radar contacts, impossible flight patterns over restricted airspace. Objects that moved too fast, turned too sharp, appeared and disappeared like electronic phantoms. The official explanation had always been atmospheric anomalies or equipment malfunction. The Belgrade mission, he whispered, more to himself than to the room. March 1987. We lost contact with an entire surveillance network for 6 hours. No explanation ever given. Ghost nodded slowly. That was us. 3 Nighthawks flying patterns that shouldn't have been possible, gathering intelligence on Soviet deployments. We painted every SAM site, every airfield, every command bunker within a 200-mile radius of the Yugoslav capital. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. And we did it without them ever knowing we were there. The silence that followed was profound. Outside, a pair of F-16s thundered overhead on a training mission, their sound Doppler shifting across the desert landscape. But inside the briefing room, 4 people grappled with the realization that everything they thought they knew about air power history was about to be rewritten. Colonel Martinez broke the silence. "Captain, why are you telling us this now, after all these years of secrecy?" Ghost's expression darkened, and for the first time since entering the room she looked genuinely troubled. "Because, Colonel, Silent Thunder is about to fly again, and this time the mission isn't just classified." She paused, her wintergreen eyes reflecting something that might have been fear. "It's impossible." The fluorescent lights continued their mechanical buzz, but now it sounded like a countdown timer ticking toward 0. General Hartwell closed the folder and placed both hands flat on the table's surface, as if trying to anchor himself to reality. "Captain Kovac, I need you to understand something. What you're describing, these missions, these aircraft, they're not just classified. They're beyond classified. They exist in a realm of national security that has its own gravity." Ghost nodded, her expression unchanged. "I'm aware of the implications, sir. I've lived with them for over 2 decades. "Then help me understand why you're surfacing now. Why break cover after all this time?" Ghost stood and walked to the room's single small window, gazing out at the flight line where rows of conventional fighters sat baking in the Nevada sun. F-22 Raptors, their angular stealth profiles representing the cutting edge of acknowledged air superiority. To most observers, they were the pinnacle of aviation technology. To Ghost, they were yesterday's news. 3 days ago, she began, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of urgency, our early warning systems detected an anomaly over the Pacific. Radar signature unlike anything in our current threat assessment databases. Speed and maneuverability characteristics that exceed known physics. Major Thompson shifted uncomfortably. "You're talking about a UFO." "I'm talking about technology that makes our most advanced fighters look like crop dusters." Ghost turned back to face the room. The object performed maneuvers that would generate G-forces sufficient to liquefy a human pilot. It changed direction without losing momentum, accelerated from hover to Mach 3 in under 2 seconds, and then simply vanished. Colonel Martinez was already pulling up classified satellite imagery on her secure tablet. "There's no record of any such contact in." "Because it was scrubbed," Ghost interrupted. classified at a level that makes Silent Thunder look like a recruiting poster. But someone, somewhere, decided it was time to dust off the old playbook. General Hartwell felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "What exactly are you saying, Captain?" Ghost returned to the table and opened another section of the manila folder. Inside were photographs, grainy, high-altitude surveillance images that showed aircraft with geometries that seemed to bend light around them. Craft that appeared more like abstract art than functional aerospace engineering. "I'm saying that Silent Thunder wasn't just about flying experimental aircraft, sir. It was about preparing for the day when experimental might not be enough." She pointed to one of the photographs. This was taken in 1987 over the Kamchatka Peninsula. Soviet Union had no idea we were there, and frankly, neither did most of our own military. The aircraft in the image defied easy description. Its surface seemed to flow like liquid mercury, and its shape appeared to shift depending on the viewing angle. It was less machine than manifestation, less aircraft than apparition. "The technology we tested back then," Ghost continued, "it wasn't just ahead of its time. It was ahead of what we thought was possible. And now someone else has not only caught up." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air like smoke. "They've surpassed us." The briefing room felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in under the weight of implications too large for the space to contain. General Hartwell realized he was holding his breath and forced himself to exhale slowly. "What do you need from us, Captain?" Ghost's smile was sharp as a blade's edge. "I need authorization to recall Silent Thunder Squadron, all surviving members." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Because, gentlemen, we're about to fight a war unlike anything in human history." The clock on the wall ticked toward noon, but time seemed to have become negotiable. General Hartwell stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished floor with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. He began packing behind the conference table, each step measured and deliberate, a man trying to walk off the weight of impossible decisions. The medals on his chest caught the fluorescent light with each turn, creating small rainbows that danced across the room's sterile walls. "Captain, what you're asking for?" He stopped mid-stride, turning to face her directly. Silent Thunder was disbanded for reasons that went far beyond mission completion. There were incidents, psychological evaluations that raised serious concerns about the squadron's fitness for duty. Ghost's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those wintergreen eyes, pain, perhaps, or the echo of old wounds. "Sir, when you spend months flying aircraft that shouldn't exist on missions that never happened, fighting enemies who were never there, it changes you. The human mind wasn't designed to process that level of cognitive dissonance." Colonel Martinez looked up from her tablet, her face pale. "I'm seeing medical reports here. Extensive psychological treatment for several squadron members. Paranoid delusions, claims of recovered memories that couldn't be verified." She paused, reading further. "2 suicides, 3 complete psychological breaks requiring permanent hospitalization." "The price of swimming in deep waters," Ghost said quietly. "We called it Ghost Syndrome, the psychological toll of existing in the spaces between official reality and classified truth. Some pilots handled it better than others." Major Thompson leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "How many of the original 12 are still functional?" Ghost was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on something beyond the room's walls. 4, including myself. Captain Alina Whisper, Volkov is running flight training at Eglin Air Force Base under her cover identity. Major James Shadowmere Washington flies commercial cargo out of Memphis, maintains his flight hours while staying off military radar. And Commander Rebecca Nightfall Chen." She paused. "Becca disappeared from official records in 1994. But I know she's still out there, still flying." The room fell silent except for the distant sound of jet engines and the mechanical hum of climate control. General Hartwell resumed his packing, but slower now, as if each step carried increasing weight. "Even if I could authorize this," he said finally, "even if I had the clearance to resurrect a squadron that officially never existed, what makes you think these pilots are still mission-capable after decades of civilian life?" Ghost reached into her flight bag and withdrew a small device that looked like a modified smartphone. She placed it on the table and activated its screen, which immediately displayed a series of flight tracking applications. 4 separate aircraft appeared as moving dots across a map of the continental United States. Whisper took off from Eglin 20 minutes ago in what's officially logged as a routine training flight. Shadowmere departed Memphis International in a cargo hauler that's carrying nothing but fuel and empty cargo containers. And nightfall, Ghost pointed to a dot moving at impossible speed over the Rocky Mountains. She's been flying continuous patrol patterns for the past 72 hours in an aircraft that doesn't appear on any registry. General Hartwell stopped packing. They know, somehow they all know. "Silent Thunder pilots don't retire, sir. We just go dormant, but when the call comes," Ghost's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty, "we answer." Colonel Martinez was frantically checking military flight schedules. "This is impossible. How are they coordinating without going through official channels?" Ghost smiled, and for the first time since entering the room she looked genuinely amused. "Colonel, we spent years operating outside official channels. Old habits die hard." General Hartwell sat down heavily, the chair creaking under the sudden weight of decision. He stared at the tracking device showing 4 aircraft converging on Nevada airspace, 4 ghosts returning from the dead. Outside, storm clouds were building on the horizon, casting the desert in alternating light and shadow. "God help us all," he whispered. "What have we awakened?" The tracking device beeped softly, indicating incoming aircraft approaching Nellie's airspace. Silent Thunder was coming home. The first aircraft appeared as a speck against the storm-darkened sky, its approach so smooth it seemed to materialize rather than descend. General Hartwell watched from the observation deck as what should have been a routine cargo aircraft executed a landing pattern that defied physics. No reduction in speed until the last possible moment, then a touchdown so precise it seemed choreographed by angels. "That's Shadowmere," Ghost said, joining him at the reinforced windows. "James always was the smoothest pilot I ever flew with. Could land a brick if you gave him enough runway." The cargo hauler taxied to a stop near the secure hangars, and a figure emerged from the pilot's door. Even at this distance, Major James Washington cut an impressive figure, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent decades dancing with death at altitude. His walk carried the unmistakable confidence of a pilot who'd never met an aircraft he couldn't master. 37 years old when Silent Thunder disbanded, Ghost continued, her voice carrying notes of affection and respect. "Best natural aviator I ever encountered. Could fly formation in a thunderstorm and make it look like a Sunday drive." The second aircraft approached from the east, officially a training flight from Eglin Air Force Base, but its pilot was executing maneuvers that belonged in an air show rather than routine training. Barrel rolls at 500 feet, knife-edge passes that showed complete mastery of aerodynamic principles. The F-16 touched down with the kind of precision that spoke of thousands of hours in far more challenging aircraft. Captain Alina Volkov emerged from the fighter's cockpit with fluid economy of motion, her slight frame belying the strength required to handle high-performance aircraft in extreme conditions. Even from the observation deck, her intensity was palpable, a coiled spring of focused energy and barely contained power. Whisper earned her call sign by speaking in frequencies only other Silent Thunder pilots could hear, Ghost explained. Russian-American, parents were aerospace engineers who defected in 1979. She understands aircraft at a molecular level, sees patterns in airflow that the rest of us have to feel through the controls. Colonel Martinez appeared at Ghost's shoulder, tablet in hand. "Captain, our radar shows a third aircraft inbound, but—" She paused, frowning at the display. "The signature is irregular. Speed readings don't match visual confirmation, and the aircraft profile keeps shifting." Ghost smiled, and there was pride in her expression. "That's Nightfall. Rebecca always was our resident magician." The third aircraft appeared like a mirage, its outline seeming to shimmer and dance against the backdrop of approaching storm clouds. At first glance, it might have been mistaken for a modified F-22 Raptor, but closer inspection revealed modifications that shouldn't have been possible, surfaces that seemed to bend light, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. "What the hell is she flying?" Major Thompson breathed, pressing his face against the observation window. "Something that officially doesn't exist," Ghost replied. "Becca specialized in testing aircraft that pushed the boundaries of material science. Metamaterial composites, adaptive surfaces, propulsion systems that—" She paused, searching for words. "Let's just say she flew planes that redefined what we thought was possible." The aircraft touched down without apparent deceleration, rolling to a stop as if gravity had simply decided to accept its presence on the runway. The canopy opened, and a figure emerged who moved with the economical grace of someone accustomed to operating in environments where every motion mattered. Commander Rebecca Chen was smaller than her aircraft suggested, but her presence filled the space around her like a force field. Even at this distance, there was something about her bearing that suggested she'd seen things that changed fundamental assumptions about reality. "Gentlemen," Ghost said, turning from the window to face the assembled officers, "Silent Thunder is back online." General Hartwell felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. 3 aircraft sat on his runway, 3 pilots who'd officially never existed preparing for a mission that couldn't be acknowledged. Outside, the storm clouds continued building, but inside the secure facility, a different kind of storm was about to break. "Captain Kovac," he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of command and the burden of impossible decisions, "you have your authorization. Whatever's coming, we'll face it together." The storm outside chose that moment to announce itself with a rumble of thunder that shook the building's foundations. But inside, 4 ghosts prepared to fly again into the space between possible and impossible, between known and unknowable. Silent Thunder was operational. The secure hangar buzzed with activity as maintenance crews wheeled out aircraft that existed in the gray spaces between official and classified. General Hartwell walked among machines that redefined his understanding of aviation technology, each one representing years of development programs so secret they'd been hidden from their own military hierarchy. Ghost stood beside what appeared to be an F-117 Nighthawk, but her trained eye caught the modifications immediately. The angular stealth bomber's surfaces had been refined, its geometry perfected through decades of computational analysis and real-world testing. The aircraft seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an optical illusion that made it difficult to focus on directly. "She's beautiful," Whisper said in accented English, running her hand along the aircraft's leading edge. Elena Volkov had always possessed an almost mystical connection to flying machines, understanding their personalities and quirks in ways that bordered on telepathic. "The surface composition has evolved. Metamaterial integration, adaptive camouflage systems." "More than that," Shadowmere added, his deep voice carrying the authority of someone who'd logged more hours in exotic aircraft than most pilots accumulated in conventional fighters. James Washington circled Ghost's aircraft with the practiced eye of a master craftsman examining a work of art. "Propulsion modifications. Those aren't standard F-117 engines." Ghost nodded, her expression mixing pride and concern. "Hybrid plasma combustion system. Allows for conventional flight characteristics when needed, but can transition to electromagnetic propulsion for extreme performance requirements." Commander Chen emerged from beneath her own aircraft, wiping her hands on a maintenance rag. Rebecca's machine defied easy categorization, part stealth fighter, part experimental research platform, part something that belonged more in science fiction than military aviation. Its surfaces seemed to flow like liquid metal, constantly adjusting their configuration based on flight requirements. "Gentlemen," she said, addressing the assembled officers with the casual confidence of someone who'd spent years operating beyond the edge of acknowledged reality. "What we're about to show you will require new classifications of secrecy." General Hartwell felt increasingly out of his depth as he watched these four pilots prepare aircraft that represented decades of development he'd never been briefed on. "Captain Chen, help me understand what we're dealing with. These aircraft, these capabilities. How is it possible that technology this advanced has remained hidden?" Rebecca smiled, and there was something in her expression that suggested she'd been waiting decades to have this conversation. "Sir, when Silent Thunder was operational, we weren't just testing experimental aircraft. We were field testing technology reverse-engineered from acquired sources." The temperature in the hangar seemed to drop 10 degrees. Colonel Martinez looked up from her tablet, her face pale. "Acquired sources." 1947, Roswell, Ghost said quietly. "Wasn't weather balloons, wasn't experimental aircraft. Was first contact with technology so far advanced that we spent the next 40 years just figuring out how to turn it on." Major Thompson's coffee mug slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on the concrete floor. "You're telling us these aircraft incorporate alien technology?" Shadowmere nodded grimly. "Explains a lot, doesn't it? How we went from propeller-driven fighters to jet aircraft in less than a decade. How stealth technology appeared seemingly overnight. How we developed materials science that was centuries ahead of projected capability." Whisper was running diagnostic checks on her aircraft systems, the cockpit displays showing readouts that belonged more in a science laboratory than a military fighter. "The propulsion systems we tested weren't just advanced," she said, without looking up from her instruments. "They operated on principles that required us to rewrite physics textbooks." General Hartwell sat down heavily on a nearby maintenance stool, the weight of revelation too much to bear standing. This changes everything. Our entire understanding of technological development, military capability, the nature of aerospace advancement." "Sir," Ghost said gently, "with respect, this changes nothing about what we're facing now. The technology gap we're dealing with makes our reverse-engineered capabilities look primitive. Whatever's out there, whatever was responsible for the Pacific anomaly." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It's not from the same source as our acquisitions. It's something else entirely." Rebecca finished her pre-flight inspection and turned to face the group. "The original technology we reverse-engineered came from scouts, reconnaissance platforms. Advanced, yes, but essentially peaceful exploratory vehicles." Her expression darkened. "What we're seeing now has a different signature entirely. Aggressive, military, designed for combat operations." The hangar fell silent except for the hum of exotic propulsion systems coming online and the distant rumble of approaching thunder. Four aircraft that shouldn't exist prepared for a mission against an enemy that defied classification, piloted by airmen who'd spent decades preparing for a war they'd hoped would never come. General Hartwell stood slowly, his decision crystallizing with the weight of absolute necessity. "How long until you can be airborne?" Ghost checked her chronometer. 20 minutes for final systems checks, then we hunt." Outside, the storm was building toward a crescendo that would shake the desert floor. But inside the hangar, four ghosts prepared to fly into darkness deeper than any earthly storm could provide. The storm broke with violence that matched the tension crackling through Nellis Air Force Base. Rain hammered against the hangar's steel roof like machine gun fire, while lightning illuminated the desert landscape in stark, artificial brilliance. But the four pilots of Silent Thunder moved through their pre-flight routines with the calm precision of surgeons preparing for critical operations. Ghost settled into her cockpit with the fluid grace of someone returning home after a long absence. The modified F-117's interior had been completely rebuilt around systems that existed decades ahead of acknowledged technology. Displays showed information in frequencies beyond normal human perception, translated into visual representations that required years of training to interpret correctly. Control, this is Silent Thunder lead requesting clearance for immediate departure. She transmitted on a frequency that officially didn't exist. The response came from General Hartwell himself, his voice carrying the weight of authorization that bypassed normal chain of command. Silent Thunder, you are cleared for immediate departure. Godspeed. One by one, the aircraft powered up their exotic propulsion systems. The sound wasn't the familiar roar of jet engines, but something more subtle, a harmonic vibration that seemed to resonate in the bones of everyone within a quarter-mile radius. Maintenance personnel backed away instinctively, their bodies recognizing something fundamentally different about these machines. Whisper's voice crackled over the squadron frequency. Silent Thunder 2, systems nominal, metamaterial surfaces adapting to atmospheric conditions. Silent Thunder 3, all green, Shadowmere reported, his aircraft seeming to shimmer and fade even while stationary. Stealth systems at maximum effectiveness. Nightfall's transmission came through with a slight electronic distortion that suggested her communication systems operated on principles that bent normal radio propagation. Silent Thunder 4, ready for impossible things. Ghost taxied toward the runway, her aircraft moving with unnatural smoothness across the rain-slicked concrete. Behind her, 3 other machines followed in formation so precise it seemed choreographed rather than piloted. Lightning illuminated their surfaces, revealing geometries that seemed to shift and flow like living things. Silent Thunder Flight, you are cleared for takeoff. Hunting parameters are loaded into your navigation systems. Target zone is approximately 400 nautical miles west-northwest of current position. The aircraft accelerated down the runway with acceleration curves that defied conventional physics. Where normal fighters would require thousands of feet to achieve takeoff velocity, Silent Thunder's exotic machines lifted off after barely 500 feet of roll, transitioning from ground effect to vertical climb with seamless fluidity. As they climbed through the storm clouds, the pilots felt the familiar sensation of leaving normal reality behind. At 10,000 feet, their aircraft began to fade from conventional radar, becoming electronic ghosts haunting the edges of detection capability. At 20,000 feet, they transitioned to full stealth mode, disappearing completely from all tracking systems. Silent Thunder lead to flight, assume hunting formation. We're looking for something that doesn't want to be found by something that officially doesn't exist. The 4 aircraft spread into a search pattern that covered hundreds of square miles of Pacific airspace. Their sensors reached out with capabilities that made conventional military systems look like toys, scanning frequencies and detecting anomalies that normal equipment couldn't even recognize as existing. Contact, Nightfall's voice carried across the squadron frequency with electronic precision. Bearing 270, altitude unknown, speed impossible. Target is pulling maneuvers that generate G-forces sufficient to liquefy organic matter. Ghost felt her pulse quicken as her displays confirmed the contact. Whatever they were tracking moved with fluid grace that suggested complete mastery of aerodynamic principles, executing turns that would destroy any earthly aircraft. Its speed varied from stationary hover to hypersonic velocity without apparent acceleration time. Silent Thunder Flight, we have our target. Remember your training, trust your aircraft, and don't believe anything your conventional senses tell you. Ghost's voice carried across the frequency with calm authority. We're about to engage an enemy that rewrites the rules of aerial combat. The hunt was beginning, and Silent Thunder was about to prove that human ingenuity could match impossible odds when pushed beyond the boundaries of acknowledged possibility. Lightning split the darkness as four ghosts closed on their target, ready to fight a battle that would never appear in any official records. The contact resolved on their screens like a nightmare taking shape in digital displays. Ghost studied the target through sensors that operated beyond conventional electromagnetic spectrum, watching an object that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Its surface appeared to ripple and flow, maintaining aerodynamic efficiency while constantly changing configuration. Silent Thunder lead, "I'm getting readings that don't make sense," Whisper transmitted, her voice tight with concentration. Target mass appears to be variable. Density shifts between solid matter and something approaching plasma state. Shadowmere's aircraft maintained position 3 miles to the east, his advanced sensors painting the target with frequencies that most Earth-based technology couldn't even detect. Confirmed anomalous readings. This thing is rewriting physics in real time. Propulsion signature suggests it's manipulating local spacetime rather than generating thrust through conventional means. The target seemed to sense their approach, despite their stealth capabilities operating at maximum effectiveness. It altered course with instantaneous precision, executing a 90-degree turn without deceleration that should have been impossible for any material object. "It knows we're here," Nightfall observed, her modified aircraft adjusting its surface configuration to match the target's energy signature, attempting to establish communication protocols. Rebecca's aircraft transmitted across multiple frequencies simultaneously, broadcasting mathematical sequences and universal constants in an attempt to establish peaceful contact. The response came immediately, not through radio transmission, but as direct neural input that bypassed their communication systems entirely. "Did everyone else just experience that?" Ghost asked, her voice carrying traces of awe and concern. The contact hadn't been words or images, but pure concept transmission, intelligence, curiosity, and underneath it all, something that might have been surprise at encountering technology sophisticated enough to track and approach its position. "It's not hostile," Whisper said, her Russian accent thickening as it did when she was processing complex information. "Confused, maybe, cautious, but not aggressive." The target executed another impossible maneuver, moving from hypersonic speed to complete stop in less than a second, positioning itself directly between Silent Thunder's formation and the storm front that continued to build over the Pacific. Lightning illuminated its surface, revealing details that challenged comprehension. The craft appeared to be constructed from materials that existed in constant flux, solid when aerodynamics required it, energy when acceleration demanded it, something between both states when simply existing in normal space-time. Its surface showed no seams, no joints, no evidence of assembly. It had been grown rather than built, evolved rather than engineered. "Silent Thunder lead, I'm detecting multiple energy signatures from the target," Shadowmere reported. "Whatever this thing is, it's not alone, picking up at least 6 additional contacts maintaining positions beyond our sensor range." Ghost felt the familiar calm that descended during combat situations, her training and instincts taking control of conscious thought. Silent Thunder had been created for exactly this scenario. First contact with technology that exceeded human understanding, operated by intelligence that might not share human perspectives on conflict resolution. "Flight, maintain defensive positions but do not initiate aggressive actions. We're explorers here, not conquerors." She switched to the broadband transmission frequency Rebecca had established. "Unknown aircraft. This is Silent Thunder lead, United States Air Force. We are peaceful explorers seeking communication." The response came as another wave of direct neural transmission, more complex this time. Images flooded their consciousness, star systems they didn't recognize, worlds where life had evolved in ways that challenged biological assumptions, civilizations that measured their existence in geological time rather than human decades. And underneath it all, a message that transcended language barriers. We have been waiting for you to develop sufficient technology to conduct this conversation. The storm clouds continued building around them, but the real storm was just beginning. Silent Thunder had made contact with intelligence that had been observing human development for decades, waiting for the moment when Earth's technology advanced enough to merit direct communication. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ghost transmitted to her squadron, "I think we just graduated to galactic politics." The target's surface configuration shifted, revealing what might have been windows or sensor arrays. And for the first time in human history, representatives of two different technological civilizations prepared for formal diplomatic contact at 40,000 feet above a storm-tossed ocean. The conversation that followed would chain everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. The neural transmission that followed carried information density that threatened to overwhelm human consciousness. Ghost gripped her controls as concepts beyond terrestrial understanding flooded her awareness, technological principles that required new mathematics to describe, energy manipulation techniques that treated physical laws as suggestions rather than absolutes. "Silent Thunder Flight, are you processing this?" She managed to transmit, her voice strained by the effort of maintaining coherent thought while alien knowledge restructured her understanding of reality. "Affirmative, lead." Nightfall's voice carried electronic distortion that suggested her aircraft systems were automatically filtering the incoming data stream. "My neural interface is translating as fast as possible, but we're receiving information at rates that exceed normal human cognitive processing." The alien craft, for that's what it clearly was, transmitted what could only be described as a technological demonstration. Space around the Silent Thunder formation began to behave differently, as if the fundamental constants that governed physics had become variable parameters. Light bent in ways that shouldn't have been possible, time flowed at different rates in different locations, and gravity seemed to operate according to someone else's engineering specifications. Whisper's aircraft shuddered as local spacetime fluctuations affected its propulsion systems. Silent Thunder 2, experiencing dimensional variance. "My engines are trying to compensate for changes in local physics that shouldn't be possible." Shadowmere's voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who'd spent decades expecting the impossible. "Silent Thunder 3, confirming reality distortion effects. Whatever technology they're using, it operates on principles that make our most advanced systems look like stone tools." The alien craft moved closer, its approach so smooth it seemed to slide through space rather than fly through it. Details became visible that challenged visual processing, surfaces that existed in more than 3 dimensions, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, symbols that conveyed meaning through direct neural interface rather than visual interpretation. Another wave of communication arrived, this time carrying what felt like formal introduction protocols. The craft's operators identified themselves through concepts rather than names. Explorer-seeker student of developing civilizations was the closest human language could approximate. They had been observing human technological development for approximately 73 Earth years, waiting for the moment when direct contact became appropriate. "They've been watching us since Roswell," Ghost realized, the pieces of decades-old puzzles falling into place with crystalline clarity. The crashed scout ships, the recovered technology we reverse-engineered. It was all part of a carefully managed contact protocol. The transmission continued, explaining concepts that required complete restructuring of human assumptions about interstellar civilization. Earth wasn't unique in developing intelligent life, but it was unusual in the aggressive rate of its technological advancement. Most species required millennia to progress from basic tool use to space-faring capability. Humanity had accomplished it in centuries. They're impressed by our adaptability, Nightfall translated, her neural interface providing real-time interpretation of concept stream transmission. Concerned by our tendency towards self-destruction, but impressed by our ability to solve problems through creative application of limited resources. The alien craft transmitted detailed technical specifications for technologies that could revolutionize human civilization. Clean energy systems based on controlled manipulation of fundamental forces.